Did you know there was a video cassette recorder that played back tape of far better quality than VHS? If MacGyver had this tool, every episode would only last a few minutes. Although we are in an era where smartphones, tablets, and Ring cameras can help solve crime, there were tech and gadgets from the past that everyone wanted. These are things we thought were so amazing, made us more productive, or we couldn't live without. Be sure to stick around for the last one, because if you used this word, it meant you were around in the late 80s, early 90s. Sony Betamax. Have you ever heard someone say Betamax was better than VHS? They weren't wrong. Sony launched the Betamax in the US in 1976 as the first home video cassette recorder for everyday consumers, priced at $1,295, roughly $6,000 in today's money. The picture quality was sharper than VHS and the cassette was more compact. The problem? It maxed out at about 1 hour of recording time. JVC's VHS tapes gave you 2, 4, or even 6 hours. People wanted to record a full movie and not be left hanging with the first half. By the mid-1980s, VHS had the shelves, the rental stores, and the living rooms. Sony kept fighting, but it was over. They finally stopped making Betamax cassettes in 2016, a full 40 years after launch. Film professionals and broadcasters continued to use Betacam, a professional version of the format, well into the 2000s. So Betamax lost a living room, but was preferred by the broadcast industry.
With Sony's Betamax, you won't miss a thing.
A triple play! You've just seen a triple play!
No, I didn't.
Leatherman Pocket Survival Tool. Have you ever asked, "What's that in your pocket?" And you replied, "Oh, it's just my Leatherman Pocket Survival Tool." Tim Leatherman, yes, that was his name, had that exact thought in 1975 when his used Fiat kept breaking down across Europe, and all he had was a Boy Scout knife. He spent the next several years designing a plier-based folding tool packed with a knife, file, screwdrivers, wire cutter, can opener, and more, all fitting in a pocket. Every major toolmaker rejected him. He launched anyway in 1983, and his pocket tool went national the next year. It retailed for $39.95, and it was a hit. The military adopted it. So did law enforcement. It became the go-to gift for dads, graduates, and anyone who liked fixing things. Leatherman sold 30,000 units in the first year and never looked back.
1984, when we were hoping to make and sell 4,000, until 10 years later in 1993, it was more than 1 million of the Leatherman Pocket Survival Tools in 1 year.
Apple Powerbook 100. When you think of a laptop, how would you describe it? Keyboard up front, trackpad in the middle, hinged screen on top? That layout didn't exist before 1991. Before the Powerbook 100, laptops were awkward machines with the keyboard shoved to the front edge and no built-in pointing device. Apple, in a surprising partnership with Sony, built the Powerbook 100 and changed everything. It retailed for $2,499, which is over $5,600 today. Apple sold $1 billion in Powerbooks in the first year. Time magazine named it one of the best products of the year. Every laptop manufacturer in the world looked at it and quietly redesigned their machines. Apple discontinued the Powerbook line in 2006, but the standard design never went away.
One of the most important things that was built in is the trackball. The trackball was before a trackpad. You couldn't use your finger on a touch-sensitive surface. Instead, you had to roll a ball to navigate the cursor in the GUI.
Sony Aibo ERS 110. What if you could have a dog without ever paying a vet bill? Sony had the world's first mass-market autonomous entertainment robot. Aibo stood for Artificial Intelligence Robot. It looked like a small metallic dog with glowing eyes that changed color based on its mood, that could walk, sit, wag its tail, recognize its owner, and develop its own personality over time. It retailed for $2,500. In June 1999, Sony made 3,000 units available for sale online in the US. They sold out in under 20 minutes. Meanwhile, Japan had 5,000 units, which sold out in 4 days. The waiting list stretched into the tens of thousands. They were so beloved that people in Japan consider them family members, and funerals were held for broken Aibos. Sony discontinued Aibo in 2006, but brought it back with a new version in 2018. Now that robots can do martial arts, it's only a matter of time before we have security robot dogs. Black & Decker Portable Electric Drill. Could you imagine being a carpenter over 100 years ago, working without electric tools? Something as simple as drilling was a whole lot of work. In 1916, two Baltimore engineers, S. Duncan Black and Alonzo Decker, designed the world's first portable electric drill. The design was genius. It looked and felt like a pistol. You pulled a trigger to run the motor. It was originally sold to factories where workers needed a way to drill in tight spaces. It immediately changed how factories worked. More than 100 years later, the Black & Decker grip and trigger design is essentially the same. The company went on to become one of the most recognized names in tools and home improvement. They introduced the first cordless drill running on a battery pack in 1961 for NASA. Today, when it comes time to hang a picture frame, you go looking for your trusty drill.
The Black & Decker Variable Speed Drill from $12.99. The drill that doubles as a screwdriver.
Poqet PC. Did you even remember MS-DOS? What if you could run it on what looked like a mini laptop? In 1989, a Silicon Valley startup called Poqet Computer Corporation made it happen. The Poqet PC weighed under a pound, had a full QWERTY keyboard, a small LCD screen, a 7.16 MHz Intel processor, 512 kilobytes of RAM, and ran on, get this, a pair of AA batteries for up to 100 hours. It could run virtually any DOS program you could throw at it. For business travelers in the late 80s, this was a miracle. It retailed for $1,995. It was very steep back then, but professionals who needed a real computer in their briefcase happily paid for it. Fujitsu acquired Poqet in 1991 and kept it going through the early 90s. Looking back, it was essentially the grandfather of a 2000s netbook. Just goes to show that some ideas were ahead of their time.
PC PQ0164, but I can't get past the entering a date.
US Robotics Sportster 56K modem. Remember the sound? That shrieking, scratching noise that means you're connecting to the internet? That was your modem. US Robotics launched the Sportster line in the early 90s, and it became the most popular dial-up modem brand in American homes. By 1995, millions of people used it to get online, check email, and wait 30 minutes for a web page with 3 photos to load. It connected through your regular phone line, which meant the moment someone in the other room picked up the receiver, you were disconnected and had to start over. Thank God, we no longer have that problem anymore. The Sportster eventually hit 56K, which was good enough to download loads of MP3 music files from Napster. Then DSL and cable arrived, and overnight it was all over. US Robotics was acquired by 3Com in 1997 for $6.6 billion. Just like that, slow speeds were a thing of the past. Dirt Devil Hand Vac. If you grew up in a large household, we bet your family had one of these. Royal Appliance introduced the Dirt Devil Hand Vac in 1984. It was the first lightweight handheld vacuum designed for quick everyday cleanups. It retailed for $19.99 and lived up to its name. It was a red, compact, cordless, easy to grab off a closet hook, and you could handle crumbs, pet hair, and small messes in seconds. Over 100 million Dirt Devil units sold in its first decade, which is remarkable for a product with almost no marketing. It made Royal Appliance one of the fastest growing companies in the US through the late 80s and 90s. Today, the brand has changed ownership several times and is now owned by Tektronix Industries.
Take a tip from Santa and give the Dirt Devil hand vac.
Koss Pro 4AA headphones. Before Beats, before Bose, before anyone put wireless earbuds in a little white case, there were Koss. John C. Koss invented the world's first stereo headphones in 1958, and by 1970, the Pro 4AA was a perfect product. Large, closed-back, over-ear headphones with deep bass and a wide frequency range were a dream come true for audiophiles. They looked like something an air traffic controller would wear, but music lovers did not care. They retailed for $59.95, about $470 today. Audio engineers used them in recording studios, DJs wore them on the air, music critics used them to review albums. Here is what makes them special. Koss still manufactures the Pro 4 AA today, with nearly the same design as it had over 50 years ago. If you want to hear what a great rock record from 1972 sounded like in the studio where it was mixed, definitely listen with a pair of Pro 4 AA's.
Same squishy ear pads. Well, how do they sound? Hey, Dark Side of the Moon sounds as good as it did back in the day.
IBM Simon Personal Communicator. Have you ever seen a mashup of a brick phone and a touchscreen? In 1994, IBM released the Simon Personal Communicator, which retailed for $899 with a 2-year Bell South service contract. It was, without question, the world's first smartphone with features such as touchscreen, apps, a calculator, a clock, a notepad, and a world time zone display. It could send and receive faxes. It even had predictive text input. In 1994, about 50,000 units were sold before Bell South discontinued it in 1995. The battery lasted roughly an hour, and the device was thick and heavy. The idea, however, was spot on. When Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone in 2007, the core concept had already existed for 13 years. The IBM Simon rarely gets credit for it, but it was the first.
I can check my calendar, I can look up a phone number, even scratch a note to myself on this touch-sensitive screen.
Sony ICR 100 radio. Do you remember being a kid and jamming out to your favorite tune on a transistor radio? Sony was thinking about the next big thing. They released the ICR 100 in 1967, the world's first radio built entirely on integrated circuits rather than individual transistors. It basically meant the radio was going to get smaller, tiny in fact. Where transistor radios use dozens of separate components wired together, the ICR 100 condensed the same functions onto a single chip. It received AM broadcasts, ran on a small battery, and came with a tiny earphone. It retailed for around $29.95 in Japan. More than the price or the size, it showed what technology could do for people every day. Sony's obsession with making things smaller, lighter, and more powerful starts right here with this tiny radio. The Walkman, the Discman, the PlayStation, they all came from this innovative company. Nikon FE Camera. Growing up, did your dad or uncle own a real camera? Not a point and shoot, but an actual 35mm SLR with interchangeable lenses? If so, there's a good chance they had this camera. Nikon introduced the FE Camera in 1978 to make high-quality, pro-level photography available to serious amateurs and hobbyists. You didn't need to be a high-fashion photographer or a National Geographic photographer to use one. If you had some basic photography skills and knew what f-stop meant, you could use the camera's aperture priority feature for automatic exposure, and the camera would figure out the shutter speed. It had a bright viewfinder and compatibility with Nikon's wide range of f-mount lenses. It was beautifully built with a metal body. It was the kind of camera that didn't feel cheap and lasted many years. It retailed for $309, roughly $1,500 today, without any lenses. Nikon produced it for 5 years until 1983. It defined the brand for a generation of photographers who were serious, but not quite pros. Film photography appeals to those looking for a unique look that can only come from such a camera, and clean Nikon FE bodies are among the most sought-after cameras on the vintage market. Some things just don't go out of style or become obsolete.
In fact, everything about this camera is simple, easy, and effective. These days, you can find the Nikon FE used very cheap.
Motorola Bravo Pager. Before your phone was always in your pocket, there was a smaller, simpler device that clipped onto your belt. In 1986, the Motorola Bravo was the most popular pager in history. It was compact and reliable. When someone needed to reach you, they called your pager number and punched in a callback number. Your pager beeped or vibrated, a numeric display showed you the number, and then you went to find a phone to call that number. They were popular with professionals such as doctors, lawyers, and plumbers. Eventually, they became a status symbol. People noticed you have a pager and it made you feel important. The cool kids from high school loved getting pages and went looking for payphones. The Bravo pager sold for around $200 to $300 plus a monthly service fee. Motorola sold tens of millions of them. At the peak in 1994, there were over 60 million pagers in use across the United States. The Bravo and other models that followed it became a cultural symbol of the era. Each page meant being reachable was validation that you had a social life. Today, if you get a call, you pray it's not a scammer. There you have it. If you enjoyed this video, watch another one. Here are more forgotten retro tech and gadgets everyone wanted.